Testing. Test. I got two live mics. You guys ready to go?
Welcome.
One of you guys.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hello. I'm Sa Gonsalvo, and I have a big echo behind me. So if you can take a seat, take your, I don't know if there are drinks already. We're going to be starting in 2 minutes. So hello, everyone. Again, I'm Sa Gonsalvo, and I'm part of the board of the Cloud Security Alliance. Welcome, everybody, and today we have a very interesting agenda for you. Um, First of all, I think we're going to introduce the board members. So we have Ranu Parma over here,
Hello, everyone.
and then we have Eric, who's here in the background. He's our producer for these events. And then who else do we have here present in the room? We have Rob. Rob is with us, and is Michael here? Michael, oh, right in front of me. Hello. And so everybody else should be online, and that's our wonderful Detroit chapter. So we welcome you tonight. And so the first topic that we're gonna have today is I wanna talk about an exciting news about the new scholarship that the Cloud Security Alliance Detroit chapter is launching today. So we're gonna have this scholarship in memory of one of our founding members of our Detroit chapter, Rajiv Das. Rajiv Das was senior director in Plante Moran, but he also was fundamental in founding this chapter. Unfortunately, Rajiv passed away last year. And so we want to give this opportunity to students to apply for this scholarship, and we're doing it that on Rajiv's memory. So the overview of the scholarship is we're going to be giving two students the opportunity to have a $2,500 scholarship to any Michigan college that they're going to be enrolled during next fall. The requirements are that the student need to be already enrolled or will be enrolled in the fall of 2022. They are going to have to be enrolled in a STEM type of degree with some interest in information security. So some, whether it's a minor or a major in information security. So if you have students here today or you have kids that are interested in becoming part of the information security profession, this is a wonderful opportunity for them to participate. We have here the link, and we're gonna be posting that in LinkedIn in our site. They're gonna have to answer 2 questions that we have there. They can be creative, do a TikTok video, they can do a podcast, whatever they wanna do. It doesn't have to be an essay, but we wanna make sure that they answer these 2 questions for them. The check will be paid off directly to the school in the fall. And so that's the timeline. April 15 is the timeline. So if you know of anybody interested, I encourage you to, for them to apply. Any questions on that? Okay, so with that, I will pass it on to Ranu.
Yes, hi. My name is Ranu Parmar, and I'm part of the board. And every time we bring wonderful cloud topics for our audience. And this time we thought we are going to focus on our research paper. And we try to focus on our city, motor city, and we decided to go for vehicle communications so that we can encourage people to join this research with the Parent Research Cloud Security Alliance work group so that we can talk about connected devices, cloud services, IoT, and everything else. So this research work group, the tangible output would be the white paper, and I'm looking for audience to participate and join this research work group so that we can have our paper published, and it will be a good opportunity for everyone who joins to network and learn more about the secure vehicle communication and cloud connective. So this is our charter, and it's approved, and I am looking for participation. Please pass it on so that you can encourage people to join this group. And this is where we are talking about risk. So this is not new to anyone. This is all unknown, but with our research paper, we'll make it known and make it more visible. So that's our research topic. And I have put some links over here, but I'm looking for audience to join. So please feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to lead this research work group. So any questions? Okay, no questions, then that's good. So let's see how many people join this. So this is some reference item that I have put together. So that's all about this research paper. And let's see what we have in the next slide. I think we have our Cloud Prayer. Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to stand over here so I don't kick the speaker into the mic. Hello, my name is Trey Gwynn. Thank you very much for taking the time to let me speak with you. I am in the office of the CTO at Cloudflare, essentially the field CTO team. If you haven't heard about us, one second. Clickers are helpful. Cloudflare is one of the world's largest sort of digital transformation networks. We power digital transformations across enterprises with 30 million applications behind us. Something about 20% of the internet-facing applications in the world are behind us. And I could talk all day long about Cloudflare, but that's not what I'm doing here today. And I've been at Cloudflare for about 9 years. I built solution engineering there. Previously, I was enterprise architect for KPMG and have worked with multinationals and governments in cybersecurity and internet infrastructure architecture generally. And today, what I want to talk about is the US government has released a strategy for zero trust. And I think this is really relevant to this audience. This is creeping me out with a slight echo. But I think it's relevant to this audience because I talk to CISOs and IT professionals regularly, and what I always hear about zero trust is, where do I start? Like, what's the journey look like? Everyone in the industry is telling me a different thing about zero trust, et cetera. And I think the fact that the US government's sort of getting behind zero trust and trying to define it themselves gives us this opportunity of a framework that is sort of divorced from the vendors and divorced from the analysts and kind of a separated third party that's hopefully useful. So my talk tonight is really sort of like cliff notes of that strategy, and hopefully it's useful for the folks here. Any nods? Is this gonna be useful? All right, sweet. So what kicked all this off? What's the motivation? And the motivation, of course, are big, terrible breaches. And we've been seeing them happen for multiple years. And really, why these are getting worse is that more and more of the world is digitized, right? There was 20 years ago when you pushed paper, you could cyber attack something and it didn't have that big of an impact. But when you attack a pipeline and the pipeline shuts down, you realize that we're just progressing into a more and more digitized world, and therefore digitized activities like cyber risk impacts more and more of our lives. And so this is just a growing area of risk. And because of that, the US government also recognizes that this is a big challenge, because not only for the government themselves to be attacked, but critical infrastructure, and they're really worried about the overall economy, major private industry, et cetera, being attacked. So they said, we gotta do something about this, and they started releasing a bunch of sort of memorandum and this, that, and the other. And one of the areas they have really focused on is they've got all this energy behind it, and they've decided that federal agencies, all federal agencies are now gonna be mandated to roll out zero trust. But what the heck does that mean, right? And so if you're not familiar with it, you have an organization called CSA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's part of DHS, and they're basically the federal agency in charge of cybersecurity. And them and OMB have built this strategy, which is essentially a mandate, published it out to the world, and they're now pushing, obviously, all federal agencies and federal contractors are gonna have to do this. Critical infrastructure will start to probably have to adopt this, but they really wanted to make it adoptable for private industry as well. So all these organizations, there's a lot of organizations, and most folks I talk to are very early in this journey, but recognize a need to go this way, and so they're trying to make this useful. And that's on one side. You've got Jen Easterly, who leads CISA, saying, this is great, go adopt zero trust. And on the other side, you've got a quote from John Kindervag, who literally coined the phrase zero trust, saying, there are no zero trust products, right? So we live in this world now where the zero trust word has been really polluted. It's sort of like the cloud washing days, where like, this is suddenly a zero trust chair. You want to buy this chair, you'll be zero trust now. So like, how are you supposed to sort of disentangle this stuff? And so that's what we're hoping to accomplish. The first thing the US government did, and I promise is not just an eye exam, is they decided just to go ahead and define zero trust themselves. And they're like, all right, we're just gonna write out a definition, because we don't really want to take the industry's definition. And it's interesting because it's pretty broad. This is not like an individual product. It's not just a network architecture. And I'm not gonna ask you to read this whole thing, but I would just like point out a couple things. In bold, like zero trust, it's a security model, their design principles, and a management strategy. So it's like all of these things together. It's like an architecture and how you operate it and what have you. It sort of recognizes that threats come from inside and outside the network. And that's really probably like the biggest thing in zero trust, is that you have to stop bloody trusting your the internal network and stop assuming that everything's safe once it's through the VPN. And that has created just constant problems of like lateral movement. And when we see ransomware, there's just like, we've just created this sort of castle and moat world, and that once you're across the moat, you can run free, and that we just have to move past that. Obviously, the other big point in this is continuous verification. It's not verification when you walk through the front door only, it's verification on every action in your application. Every time you access some data, you need to be continuously verifying the users. You should be giving, of course, your users all the access they need and exactly nothing more than that. So it's sort of just giving people, minimum amount of access. And then I think the other thing that's really important here that they're recognizing, and I think mature sort of security professionals and CISOs that know what's going on, they have to recognize that breaches happen. This is not a thing like, I'm gonna make sure that we never have a breach. It's breaches are inevitable, and they probably are happening right now. And so you have to think about how you build your sort of cybersecurity capabilities around the ability to deal with breaches, not to assume it's never going to occur. That assume it will occur, and how are you going to roll with the punches? So, what did the U.S. government publish? They published 3 documents. One is the Zero Trust Strategy, which really actually is like a mandate for government agencies. So this is a list of things you need to go do if you're a government agency. Turns out that's a pretty good checklist if you're a private industry to say, these are things I probably want to do myself if I want to adopt Zero Trust. On top of that, they released a maturity model, which is really handy, which says, all right, Zero Trust strategy, it's this big, giant beast of a thing to do. What are you doing with this sort of philosophy? And they broke it up into 5 pillars. And then the maturity model lets you sort of grade yourself on each of the pillars to say, okay, how am I doing in identity? How am I doing on my devices side, on data? And you can see for an organization, where should I focus my energy? Like, where am I most mature and least mature? And of course, the reference architecture. So these guys mean business. They gave you all this sort of information that they're able to roll out. And because they are responsible for federal government, the agencies actually have to do this. At Cloudflare, we're a major Zero Trust vendor. Obviously, we got our products. Surprise, surprise, our stuff doesn't cover all of this. No vendor stuff covers all of this. It's a bit more holistic. But we pay a lot of attention to this because, and I think everyone should, because the federal government is the biggest buyer of anything in the world. Whether you're talking about battleships or toilets or whatever, nobody outspends the US federal government. So when they say they're going to do Zero Trust this way, the industry chirps up and says, "Okay, this is how it's going to roll." And so you'll see this is going to be really impactful. I think just in 2022, they're expected to spend $20 billion on cybersecurity just in the federal government. So that's why this is going to be impactful, and we should all probably pay attention to it. So there are 5 pillars to the Zero Trust strategy, and I'm just going to do a quick run through of some of the highlights from each of these pillars and sort of nice takeaways, and hopefully this is informative. And they're around identity, device, network environment, application workload, and data. These are sort of 5 areas. And you can read, of course, about all of this at zerotrust.cyber.gov. You can access the docs, etc. This screen grab is from the maturity model that they've published. So let's start with identity. By the way, you'll notice that these slides were not made by our marketing department. I made them, apologies. I was trying to just get it down to very specific takeaways, and hopefully this is useful. First step is centralize your identity management system. And this is something I should have mentioned. When they recognize this is a big holistic move, trying to adopt a Zero Trust philosophy. It's not a binary thing. You can't just say okay, I'm Zero Trust now. It's a journey that you're on. There's no product, etc. But the other problem is that there's not really a start point and a stop point to this. There's not one path that everyone takes. And so they recognize that you're gonna probably move, forward on the different pillars at different paces. All that said, there are certain things that are pretty much dependencies to everything else. And first point on identity, having a centralized identity management system is something you're not going to get away with outdoing. So this is everyone rolling out Okta or rolling out Active Directory. You need to have a place where you have a way to authenticate users. Pretty straightforward. It should be recognized, though, it doesn't mean that you have to have one. You know, a lot of big organizations have 15 different identity management systems. They just need to be federated and organized. Beyond that, then you also need to roll out MFA, so multi-factor authentication, and they're actually calling out strong multi-factor authentication. I'm going to jump to sort of point B here. They really want to make sure that MFA becomes phishing resistant. So they're explicitly now calling out and mandating you can't use text messages, you can't call people, giving someone just a number over the phone is no longer sufficient. You need to have some system that's able to detect a man-in-the-middle attack when it comes to multi-factor auth. The thing to look out for if you're looking for solutions are things that are compliant with FIDO2, FIDO2. And what it does essentially is it's a challenge and response, and they sign the challenge and cryptographically sign the response, and therefore you can sort of detect if someone's man in the middle. At Cloudflare internally, we don't sell this, but we use YubiKeys. So like YubiKeys is an example of a FIDO2 multi-factor auth. But it's interesting that they're calling this out and saying you can't do text messages, and you can't do Google Auth OTP anymore, right? Like those sort of one-time codes. And even the old RSA tokens are saying, yeah, those aren't good anymore because there's no way to stop you from typing that into the wrong website. So that's a big sort of shift going to phishing-resistant MFA. Sort of stepping up from that, there's this this mandate to enforce authentication at the application layer, not at the network layer. What this starts to introduce, and you'll see as you go through this, is nails in the coffin on the VPN. So we're going, okay, we're moving away from giving people access to a network to giving people access to an application. And so you're starting to see, you know, enforcing that authorization at the application layer. And then, of course, on the sort of third point, this is sort of a hallelujah moment for me. They're like, great, the folks are reading actual security research and looking at the data and not necessarily going with what has been done for many years, but they're now making it, I guess, against the rules for federal agencies to require arbitrary password rotation or to require arbitrary, you know, combinations of letters and numbers and stuff in your password. And this seems sort of counterintuitive, but the reason they're doing this is the research actually shows that when you have these policies in place, people have worse passwords, and you end up in a worse security situation. And so this is like an example of like an obvious thing you could take away tonight and apply if you wanted to do it. And if you want to see the research, go look at the strategy, and they reference the research papers, et cetera. And then the last point that they're saying is that when they're authorizing an identity, you have to do it authorizing with, what is it called? Yeah, consider at least one device level signal. They're introducing, which is actually kind of new to me, was this concept of ABAC, which was attribute-based access control. I see some nods, so not new to everybody, but attribute-based access control. Previously, we've all lived in a world of RBAC, right? Role-based access control. I'm in accounting, therefore I have access to the accounting application because accounting's my role. ABAC is attribute-based control. It says, you know, where are you accessing the application from? What's the device you're accessing it from, et cetera. So examples are like the geography you're in. Are you accessing it from the United States? What's the sort of device posture of the device you're connecting to? Is it is it patched and have up-to-date AV? Is it running CrowdStrike? You know, da-da-da-da. And so you have to check that along with your authentication of your username. You need to be able to pull those things together before allowing access to an application. Interestingly, because you have to constantly evaluate people, it's not just sort of access at the front door. This one also is another little sort of nail in the coffin on the VPN, because if you're constantly evaluating like a device posture, you need to be able to do that like as the person's interacting with the application, as they move to the next application, not only when they log into the VPN. So I know this is maybe a little bit dry, but hopefully this is useful. We're going on to the second pillar. We're moving quickly. The pillar on devices, this is like a 10-second slide. This is pretty straightforward. They're saying you got to do two things. You got to have reliable asset inventory, and two, you need to have EDR. Like you got to have CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or whatever your EDR tool of choice is. Conveniently, your EDR tool probably gives you an inventory, so it gives you a nice head start in that direction. So this is relatively self-explanatory, but you need to do that as part of your Zero Trust. If we can go on to network, sort of third pillar, there's some interesting things. I would argue they're sort of pushing the ball forward pretty aggressively here. First thing is they're now mandating the encryption of DNS queries, so recursive DNS. So when you're doing a DNS lookup, it can't be done in clear text anymore. When you think about, we've been pushing encryption for 10 years on the internet. Now we're talking about doing it on DNS as well. And this is relatively, I guess, forward-leaning in this direction, but we recognize that in this Zero Trust world, you've got users all over the place connected to all kinds of Wi-Fi, and if you don't want to leak everything out to through DNS, which is over clear text, you need to encrypt that. And so you can do DNS encryption over TLS, DNS over HTTPS, the different sort of standards for it. CSA themselves are actually making an encrypted DNS service available to most of the federal government that we happen to run. So if you want to buy that, we're happy to sell it to you too. But anyways, but it's just a thing to think about is making sure you're encrypting DNS. Beyond that, encrypt HTTP as well. We've been all doing that for 10 years already. That's not anything surprising. I think maybe that whether they're pushing the ball forward a little bit here is around a protocol called HSTS, which, and HSTS and preload, which really is a way to tell browsers that you can never connect to this resource on HTTP. It has to always be on HTTPS, because there's a whole sort of class of downgrade attacks out in the world. And so they're saying, okay, not only do you have to do HTTPS, but you also need to roll out HSTS with preload. And they're pushing TLS 1.3, so the most recent version of SSL or TLS. This is probably likely useful for anyone that runs a corporate network, because TLS 1.3 is a real thing. It's growing. We already see the stats. It's growing on the internet in general. But once this starts getting mandated, if you have a forward proxy where you're trying to inspect all of your users' traffic, make sure your forward proxy supports TLS 1.3, because not all of them do, and you don't want to get stuck in a position where your employees can't actually get their work done because they can't connect to the thing they need to over because your forward proxy doesn't decrypt TLS 1.3. The other thing I thought was really funny out of this strategy, you started looking into it, is they're working on a standard for encrypted email. If you sort of read between the lines on this strategy, they're like, we should really encrypt email. This is super important. And email is a mess. And there's like not a good standard way to get people to encrypt email and this, that, and the other. So there's sort of like a more to come in this space. So I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's interesting. I feel like they kind of admitted defeat a little bit and said, all right, this is a mess, and like there's a bunch of stuff we want to do, and this is an area that's sort of painful, but still obviously very important. And then lastly, develop a zero trust network architecture. This is where microsegmentation finally fits in. Everyone's been hearing about microsegmentation, putting firewalls in everywhere, et cetera. This is when you finally sort of introduce that. The other big key here, and this is like, with the CISOs I talk to, this is a big, scary, maybe we'll do this, maybe we won't. This is also sort of kick your users off the network. Like, you've got your network and you've got your users on it and applications and your databases, et cetera. Over time, zero trust is really about getting those users off the network and treat them like they're coming from a Starbucks. And that is a big shift, but that's an area where we essentially all have to move to, and that's not going to happen overnight, but that's a big part of this sort of developing a zero trust network architecture. And again, another sort of nail in the coffin of VPN, because you're not just giving people access to the network anymore, you give them access to applications that are inside your network. Then when they jump into I think this is our fourth pillar, applications and workload. This starts to fall more into sort of operations and procedures. So first step, you should have a security team. Hurrah, we should all do this, right? We should do security reviews. When you're pushing things out into the wild, you should definitely be doing security reviews, et cetera. This is nothing new or surprising. We all work in security. This keeps us in our jobs. This is great. The second point, which is maybe moving a little bit more, is that not only do you have to have your internal security team, but they're mandating the use of third-party security reviews. So this is sort of the auditor move, that exists in the world. Like, you can't just grade your own homework. You need to bring in a third party to say, are you grading your homework well or not, as well. So, but this is also, probably a very good thing to think about if you're running a security program. How do you have your internal team, and how do you keep your internal team honest with an external team? Other point here, which is also a pretty big about face for the federal government, is the mandate to have a welcoming public vulnerability disclosure program. Basically bug bounties, right? Not too long ago, the federal government, if you pointed out some vulnerability in some terribly built application, they wanted to throw you in jail. It's like, how dare you look at the source code of this HTML and point out that I embedded a bunch of private data into the HTML? We're going to arrest you for that. No. So thankfully, this is like a major about face to say, hey, we actually want to have and must have public vulnerability disclosure programs and bug bounties. I would consider this the sort of take your head out of the sand policy, because you really want to know what's actually happening. When I've talked to vulnerability, or I should say like security researchers about bug bounty programs in the past, the best line I've always heard is, whether you realize it, there is a bug bounty program for your organization. You may be involved in that bug bounty, or you may not be. So it's either the black hat guys have a bug bounty going for your organization and you don't hear anything, or you can be involved in the circle and let the white hackers tell you about it as well. But whether you think it's happening or not, it's definitely occurring. So you might as well get some of that intel yourself. Beyond that, they are actually pushing and mandating in pretty near term, every agency makes a FISMA moderate, and FISMA is just sort of the data classification, like risk classification of applications, but taking a real application and making it available over the internet. And they explicitly say no VPN. And so this is interesting. Another nail in the VPN coffin. And I would say this is a pretty big move. I mean, for us at Cloudflare, we're all about the internet, but this to me is this sort of like kind of line in the sand where we're starting to say, maybe this is that tipping point where the internet is starting to eat into the corporate network, and it's starting to be the way that people connect to applications, no matter where those applications are. So we'll see, judge my bold prediction in 10 years if this is where we're going, but this could be sort of the very beginning of the end of the corporate network as we know it, because we're starting to push applications and say that the primary way you're going to access applications is over the internet. Of course, the other great part about this is you're a very trusted employee, and you're a trusted contractor, and you're a hacker, and we're going to treat you all the same. That's the whole point of Zero Trust, is like you need to validate who you are, and if you're telling someone they're going to put their application on the internet, they all get their hackles up and they're like, oh, that's so scary. You're like, great, you should be scared. You should make this really hard to access, and you should be validating who you're connecting from. Fifth point, if you are a government agency, lucky you, CISA and GSA will provide a vulnerability scanning service for you. I don't know if anyone in here gets that, but maybe you want to go look for vulnerability scanning services. Those are good things to do. And then the last item, which I thought was nice, and this was not a mandate as much as you should work in this direction, is immutable configuration. And what does this really mean? And they're really pushing this for cloud infrastructure, but no more people clicking buttons trying to do config management. We've seen just sort of like countless times where cloud infrastructure is really complicated, and you have a new application, you've got it in QA, and someone's trying to make it work, so they just open up the S3 bucket so everyone can see what's going on. Then that application goes into production, and then a year later, someone discovers a bunch of customer PII that's still wide open, and you have a major incident. Like, these are the kinds of things that happen because you have people sort of like manually clicking and doing config. If you start to do essentially DevOps and manage your configuration with tooling, you can actually do things like validating that, you know, all your S3 buckets are locked down, and you can actually measure configuration drift and all these things. So nice to see that, you know, under this, like, this is showing you sort of how broad their sort of zero trust umbrella is a push towards sort of DevOps and immutable config. On the data front, this was interesting. I guess the sort of first point is we got CISOs and we have chief data officers. Turns out you guys need to work together and come up with strategies where you are functioning together, because zero trust is so much about protecting access to the application or the data behind that application. So you really want to start thinking about how you work with the data protection officer or the data officer at an organization. How are you classifying things, et cetera? There's a mandate that to start automating this as well. So the data protection officer needs to start automating data classification, and the CISO needs to start automating sort of security response. If we start talking about accepting the fact that breaches are going to happen, it almost becomes business as usual when bad things happen. You need to start thinking about how do you have that tooling in place and automation in place to start saying, okay, I have 5 breaches that happened this week. You know, what's the flow that we run through, and how do we pull forensics, et cetera, and how do we automate that? Along those lines, a mandate to audit all encrypted data access. And it's interesting, it's written as you have to audit all data encrypted at rest in commercial cloud infrastructure. They also, in another part of this strategy, say you have to encrypt all data that's in commercial cloud. So this is basically, should have just said, you know, audit all access to data. And then the sort of final step here, this is really like make sure you've got your SIEM game is strong, right? Like you've got a good SIEM in place, you're capturing logs, and you are pulling them from all these different systems. And one of the things that we're seeing in computing in general, and we definitely see this at Cloudflare, is the modern enterprise used to be way more centralized. It used to be kind of everybody in one place with computers down the hall and your servers in the basement. And now we're in this world where you're using 5 cloud providers and 6 SaaS providers, and you've got remote users, and everything's sort of spread out to Kingdom Come. And so when you start thinking about logging, like you have to like capture from so many places, and logging becomes such a critical part, and visibility becomes such a critical part of understanding what's happening. This is important because also breaches are going to happen. You need to be able to figure out, did someone move laterally? Did they exfiltrate data, et cetera? And then the other thing is they actually call out is that it needs to be collected in a way that you can share information. Because it'd be organizations like this where you share information about threats and how you stopped it, what worked, what didn't, because you've got to know the adversaries are sharing information as well. And so being in a position where you can sort of collect that information and share it with peers is going to be really critical to working together as a security community. And this is the last pillar, which was called policy alignment. It's sort of the grab bag of like random stuff they threw at the end of the strategy. And really what it came down to is they had all this cool stuff in the strategy, but in government they have lots of policies, and they said, well, how does this policy interact with this policy, et cetera, et cetera. But this is sort of like the amendments, like don't forget these things as well. First one they call out is IPv6 is still a thing. It's still growing, it's still becoming more and more capable. And so they said, make sure it works with IPv6, your zero trust solutions. Probably the thing that private industry can take away from this is make sure you don't go buy a tool that doesn't support IPv6, because you don't want to be 3 years down the path and realize that people can't access it from T-Mobile anymore. And so this is pretty old at this point for IPv6, but you want to make sure that whatever tooling you're using has supported probably for 5+ years. The second point was on MFA, and they have sort of some clarifications in here. If you are in federal government, they have a thing called the PIV card, which is their phishing-resistant MFA, but they also talk a lot about FIDO too. So this is just sort of another hammer down on phishing-resistant MFA. any MFA is not necessarily sufficient, like it needs to be phishing resistant and going into sort of the FIDO2 classification. We talked in the last slide about network logging, or sorry, application logging and accessing logging every time data is accessed and encrypted, and you've got to have your sort of seam game going very, very well. This is also just says don't forget to log network traffic as well, because when you do your forensic analysis, you're going to have to go back and look at that. And then final, it's interesting they had to call this out, but they said, oh, in your internal networks, you need to do HTTPS and encryption as well. And you're like, come on, guys, like zero trust. The whole point is you can't trust the internal network. So you can't just run things unencrypted on the internal network because you're just going to get yourself in trouble, because that is, again, like a source of risk. And so it just sort of hammers down the point of doing encryption and treating your internal network as much as possible like the internet, really. I mean, that's what this comes down to. And so last slide I will leave you with, if I can click. There's a whole bunch here, obviously. I mean, there's enough in there to keep pretty much anyone busy for 3 or 4 years, probably at most organizations. And I talked to lots of CISOs that have not even really begun this, and they're always wondering where to get going. After reading through and listening to folks talk about the strategy and the direction it's going, I feel like there's 3 big areas. If you want to bite off 3 big areas that will really move the ball forward in an organization, it would be these 3. I mean, 1, getting your identity management system centralized. This is huge and will have a massive impact on securing your organization. 2, getting good MFA in place. That is, like, there's probably nothing bigger. I mean, right now with the tensions in Ukraine and Russia, we're constantly asked by organizations, how do we improve our cybersecurity posture? That's probably one of the biggest things you can do to help stop problems in your organization. And then the third item, as we saw throughout this whole sort of strategy, there's all these sort of nails in the coffin on the VPN. We have to stop giving people access to a network and give them access to applications. And so if you started these 3 things, this would also keep you busy for quite a while, but these sort of all trickle down to a lot of the other things sort of mentioned, and that is the extent of my presentation. If anyone has questions, feel free to shout them out, otherwise I'll be around here. I really appreciate you guys giving me the time, and wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Trey. I'm going to walk this way now. That's loud. Thank you very much for Cloudflare and Rubrik for sponsoring this. Without them, this doesn't happen. So really appreciate all of that. Real quick, just wanted to let everybody know the food is in the back. There's drinks. So we'll take a small break real quick, let you grab that, and then we'll be back to it in a second.
Hello, everybody. I would like to remind everyone, hello, hi. My name is Juman. I am one of the board members of the CSA Detroit um, board. I am gonna get them to listen up, hold on. I just wanna make sure that I'm not like screaming at everybody. May I have your attention, please? Thank you. Rock on. We have food in the back, as everybody have seen. Gonna give you 2 more minutes, and please, we want everybody to be seated so we can start our second presentation. We would love to network with you, but we're gonna do that after. So the sooner you sit down, the sooner we network. 2 minutes, you're on the clock. Where's the clock? Where's the clock? Go, now. Hello? Hello? Okay. Do we have any students here tonight? Students, raise your hand. Yes, thank you. Students, I need you to go to Rob Force. Rob, raise your hand. Register your name with him, just make sure, because we will be having raffles for our students. So you want to win money? Get up there. 2 minutes is up. Okay, everybody sit down, please. Thank you, everyone. Grab the last plate you can find and we have open spots out here and over here too, right? Is this available as well? Maybe not, okay. But we have few open spaces over here. Thank you, that is wonderful. We have a special announcement for you today. One of our wonderful board members, Renu, is gonna come up here and tell us all about it.
So I'm coming from the second time, so bear with me. So I'm going to talk about Women's Security Alliance. And International Women's Day is coming on March 8th, and I thought it's an opportunity to talk and let you know what Women's Security Alliance is. So we basically believe that cybersecurity career is possible for anyone if they have a passion and interest. And we have proven success with mentorship model, and one of our board members here, Eric, He supported one of our mentee, and she is right now working as a threat researcher at Ford. So you can understand how important mentorship plays in cybersecurity. We all know about the talent shortage and this whole talent pool and everything else, and diversity and inclusion, how important it is. So please promote and support Women's Security Alliance. And it's not just about March 8th as International Women's Day. I personally believe that every day is Women's Day. So let's celebrate and support Women's Security Alliance. Thank you. Jaman, Eric, do you want to join us and say something, Za? They are all part of our members, mentors. So huge thanks to Za, Jaman, and Eric for supporting us.
All right, you got your own. That's mine. I'm keeping that one. So thank you, Renu. If you guys don't know, but Renu is one of the founders, actually, of WAMSA. So if you didn't know that, like, we're really very proud of you for doing this. This is a very good organization. It really helps us in the profession to introduce more women into the workforce. We are already down so much when it comes to talent, so just making sure that we are making that available for them and having a straight path to some kind of a cybersecurity career is like really important. I had the opportunity to be a mentor already, and I'm signed up for the next one too. And I please encourage all of you to do so. It is such a wonderful feeling to be able to pay it forward. So WAMSA thankfully have done that. We've had a lot of success. I know the mentee that I had, she already got promoted and got into the second level where she wanted. So it's a great reward too.
Hi, as a Latino woman in cybersecurity, for me, it's super important to sponsor other people, whether is woman or not, anybody that is interested, especially minorities, to get into this field and any technical field. I had the experience of mentoring a couple of the women, and I have to tell you, even if you have kids that are interested, you should check out the WOMSA.org website, WOMSA.org. They have a wonderful decision tree and interactive map, not only of where are the jobs right now, the job openings, the salaries for security, but also a whole path of careers, potential careers in anything, things that I didn't even know I could do within security. So for anybody that is interested, I would encourage you to go there, and for your kids. I mean, I have a senior in high school, and she doesn't want anything to do with this, unfortunately. But I keep trying. Look at this. How about this? So I encourage you to do the same.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's a, wow. Maybe I've just got that loud of a voice. I'll just hold it out here. It is an absolutely amazing organization in partnering with WAMSA. You know, it's been a benefit to all of us, and really appreciate the partnership with CSA. And I was checking out the website for International Women's Day today, and the first line on it was, imagine a gender equal world. And for those that don't know much about me, I have 4 little girls at home, so this resonated right away. You know, as we think about that diversity drives creativity, and as we think about equity and inclusion, how important that is within each of our organizations, but also as we look at it in the context of CSA and empowering women, empowering everyone for the future generations, not only for technology and security, but in all aspects of life. So it's an absolute pleasure to be able to partner with WAMSA, and it's one of the core tenets of CSA as we look to continue to partner and find ways to empower women and others.
Thank you all. So please promote and support WAMSA. So our next guest is Dan from Rubric. Dan, it's all yours. Take it.
Good evening. great to see CSA and WAMSA efforts to date, and I'm sure continued success for you guys. So congratulations on that. Good evening, guys. It's great to see people out and about, face to face. How great is this, right? Finally, right? No more Zooms tonight. Even though I know you're on Zoom, that's okay. But it's good to see folks here. I'm joined by my engineer, Jamie McNeil, who will be up here joining me in a few minutes. And just want to thank CSA for letting us participate, being part of a great program, and just spending quality time with great people. And Jamie and I were talking this week, and we've been in IT, for like 20 years individually. And when you think about 20 years, that goes by fast. It's a long time. You make great relationships, and you learn a lot of things along the way. But I also have some trivia for you. So I was looking back 20 years ago. In 2001, 2002, you guys can blast us out. If you're chewing, please finish your chewing first. How many folks were connected to the internet in the early 2000s, percentage-wise of the population? Okay, you're younger. I got it. Somebody throw a number out. I heard 0.5%. I like it. World population connected, percentage-wise. 7%. It's what I read. So Price is Right, 5%. Round up, perfect. So that was great. It's amazing. You think about that, huh? Plate of pasta. Is that good? And so think about that. Now today it's 59%. Call it 60%, right? So significant in just 20 years. 2001, 2002. How many folks had mobile phones? Would you have to guess? Yeah, 740 million people worldwide had mobile phones. Guess how many folks have mobile phones nowadays, 20 years later? Everyone. As a matter of fact, the answer is 8 billion, which is more phones than the population. So the bots are taking over for sure, right? So Jamie and I are here to talk a little bit about something that's significant to the board, significant to us as IT teams, as leaders, as everybody in the industry, and that's ransomware, right? Ransomware has gone from, in 1989, a ransomware effort and attack was put on a floppy disk, sent to people, to their homes, to their computers. They put the do you know what a floppy disk is from college? Okay, all right. Just, cool, man. I was going to say don't worry about it if you didn't, but that's awesome. Good for you. There we go. We'll talk later over a cocktail. So, and then inadvertently, the user thought it was fine. They would open up the floppy disk, the files, and it was blocked. And ransomware was $189 to get their files back. So lots of cases, but some of those cases from time to time. Think about it now. It's a $1 trillion industry, right? Over $1 trillion. It's being impacted. Cloudflare did a great job taking through some of the steps and said it very well of this is not a product. This is a philosophy. This is a process. So the good news is we hear trillions and the bad guys and all the attacks. But the good news is there's people like us out there in the industry, right? We care. We care about our companies. We care about us individuals. And we want everyone to thrive and not pay the bad guys. So I think that's what's really exciting is now it's a big concern. It's a boardroom concern. But there's ways together that we combat this. So Jamie and I are going to talk through a little bit about kind of what a ransomware attack looks like. And so what are the things you should be thinking about as that hits. Rubrik really helps customers as that last bastion to protect their data. So if you're to get hit and your backups get compromised, which is happening, we help recover at scale. So our customers really rely on Rubrik to help them in their ransomware strategy. Jamie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. This is like the first public speaking thing I've done, and I feel like it's been 2 years now. Yeah, so yeah. I was telling Dan, just a little bit intimidating. So good to see you all tonight. Thank you very much for the time. And as Dan said, want to focus on, if I can get this to click, there we go. Our agenda is going to be focused on the current problem statement. I'll stand over here with regards to ransomware and how it pertains to your last line of defense. I cannot stand here and listen to myself. I'm sorry. I don't know if this is going to click. There we go. The enemy of a ransomware attack and what's going through the mind of InfoSec and IT teams. We talk to a lot of customers every day, and they challenge us with requirements and things they're thinking of to protect themselves from these sort of events. Industry definitions and loosely used data protection terms. We'll cover those because those are slung all over LinkedIn and social media. This is just weird. And then requirements to consider in order to protect your business from these sort of attacks, and then demanding more from backup than just backing things up. We all know backup is like the most exciting thing in the data center. I'm so happy I get to talk about it every single day. And then always, let's not forget about our cloud and our SaaS applications. So in everyone's mind, this will be the left, the hurricane, and on the right, what's more scary to all you, the right or the left at this point in time as far as a disaster goes? The right is the right answer, absolutely. So ransomware is a major disaster, threat at this day and age. More people are planning for a cyber recovery, a cyber event than anything, than a natural disaster. So more and more that's coming to the forefront. People are putting the natural disasters more on the back burner, and they're more concerned about these types of things. And video's kind of covering up my screen there, but a lot of it's driven by ransomware as a service, right? So I can go out and leverage a pre-designed ransomware attack that's guaranteed to lock somebody's data down and leverage that to go about my attack and just saturate potential customers, or not customers, I'm sorry, but businesses. Double extortion. So if I can get in, I can encrypt your data, and I can pretty much make you pay to get it back. I can also take the data if I find sensitive data and go ahead and sell that on the dark web, right? So these are all driving this whole ransomware environment. If we look at a pretty publicly known attack, Colonial Pipeline, for example, if you think about that, how big of a story that was is really because of the impact it made. If you look at it, it's 45% of all fuel on the East Coast supplied by Colonial. They were hit with ransomware as a service. Citizen reaction was really the worst than the attack. You thought everybody went into a panic, bought all the gas up, and freaked out. And then IT solutions in place and operational resilience was able to be recovered, right? So they had a solution in place. They did pay the ransom. Obviously, many of you know the story. But what they found was when they went to recover using the tool from the ransomware attackers, it was so slow, they resorted to their backups, right? And they were able to restore all systems protected. And this is the big problem, right? So this is the problem that customers are coming to us with, is that they're making investments in all these different layers of their environments, right? They're putting all these tools in place, and the bad guys still get through. And I always like to open up when I talk about this slide, because unlike Trey, I didn't make all my own slides. I did pirate a number of decks internally to put this together. So I talked about this a lot with customers because these layers are critical to your business. We're not saying get rid of them or they're not important. What we want to focus on really is security at the point of data, right? My last line of defense. And if you think about it, all these applications live everywhere. Trey talked about it in his presentation earlier. I got stuff running in the enterprise, stuff running in the cloud. I have SaaS applications running, and I'm kind of constrained to everything in my last line of defense being on this backup system. So it's pretty critical. And if we look at today's threat and kind of how this works through customer environments, and what we're hearing is, essentially the ransomware comes in, locks down transactional systems and the notes received. From there, you have some options, right? So I can either pay the ransom, which is becoming less and less likely because cybersecurity insurance companies don't want to pay ransoms anymore. So it's becoming harder and harder. So option 2 is attempt to recover. So most customers go through this kind of exercise, and when this happens, and when they hit and they attempt to recover, they engage 2 teams. They engage the IT operations and the SecOps teams. IT ops will go through and start restoring things, and then SecOps will start performing forensics against the data and make sure, hey, is it clean? Is it safe to put back online? Or is it still infected or impacted or encrypted? And then from there, they need to determine, are my backups safe? Did my backup system get hit? And do I have no way to recover? Therefore, I had to pay the ransom. And if things work out, we run our forensics, our backups are safeguarded, they were not impacted by the incident, I now can go through and start going through my recovery process. And I got to figure out what point of time do I recover from, and I also got to figure how long is this going to take me. And a lot of legacy solutions do have some challenges with regurgitating data or putting data back. They're great at storing it, they store it very efficiently, but as far as putting the data back at scale, it's a big challenge, right? On top of that, they also suffer from some deficiencies as far as a lot of them are 20-year-old technologies that leverage some protocols that put them at risk for being attacked. So So the idea would be you want to secure your last line of defense. So we want to make sure we have solutions in place that enable cross-team functionality or collaboration between IT ops and SecOps. Both teams use very different tools in these sort of exercises. We want to make sure our backups are safeguarded. We want to make sure we understand a blast radius and scope of the attack. And we want to identify if any sensitive data may have been involved in that attack. And then we want to recover quickly. So this is kind of the ideal type of solution people are looking for. I want to make sure I kind of have all these 4 buckets covered at the bottom if I get hit. I want to make sure that my backups are not impacted, they're not encrypted. I want to make sure I can quickly identify what might be in the backup payload that's been hit with ransomware, and only recover the healthy data. So a couple key principles of data protection. I think you see these everywhere nowadays. So we talk about air gap, immutability, and retention lock. Again, I'm the backup guy, real exciting things to talk about. But we talk about air gap. If there's no air gap in place in my data protection solution, it means that the backup solution is online and that the systems it protects can see the data, the backup data. Or it's sitting on a repository that's available on the network as a mountable file system. If it's a logical air gap, this means that the solution is online, but the backups are not able to be accessed by the endpoints being protected. Also, no, it's not a storage protocol that's just sitting open on the network that could be mounted against and edited. And then the physical air gap, I think the best example of this is tape. We all seen tapes in data centers, but they also have a major downfall because in the event of an attack and I'm having to restore data and see what's the clean copy and what copy am I gonna go to, loading tapes and restoring data over and over again is not gonna give you a good RTO. So you leave the business in a bad position. Immutability, we talk about immutability. We see that everywhere at this point. Again, social media. My definition would really, if something's mutable, it can be changed. If it's immutable, you can't edit it. Once it's been put in place, you can't change it. And then, air gapping and immutability are important, but also retention locks. Backups really are defined around how frequently I protect things and how long I keep the data for. If somebody could come in and I have an air gap and I have an immutable system I'm laying data on, but somebody can come in and edit the retention of that data and say, hey, I'm going to take the data from 30-day retention to 1 day, kind of exposed. So 3 key areas of data protection to consider. So how do you best protect yourself? How do we keep the bad guys from coming in and exposing any sort of backup data and encrypting your last line of defense? So it starts off with hardening your backup architecture. So on the left is really kind of a legacy backup approach. And what happens is the bad guys will come in and they will attack a lot of the backup software that's running in the environment. And I'm not here to pick on Windows, but a lot of these solutions use Windows systems, and those are a major threat, right? They're easy to access. They're full of risk, and the bad guys will access that and take those systems out. So if you get hit with a ransomware attack and you need to recover, you're now spending your time recovering the backup software. So you obviously want to try and position yourself away from that. A lot of these solutions do use legacy disk-based backup targets, so they'll use like NFS protocols that are mountable on the network. They'll go around the network, they'll look for these, and they'll try to find your backup repository, and they'll go ahead and encrypt all the data in it. And then they'll go ahead and take out your primary production data, and now any major attacks an unrecoverable event. So things we're challenged with when customers come to us, they want a solution that's going to consolidate and take away those components of risk, right? These create different attack vectors, the bad guys that come in and again put you in that position where I got to now rebuild the backup environment before I can start restoring things. They want a backup storage medium that's not accessible in the network. I don't want a file system sitting out there that somebody can go find, explore, and start encrypting. They want to make sure the backups are laid down in an immutable format. Once they're written, they don't want them to be able to be changed. And we heard about this at Trey's presentation, zero trust, right? This is a common word we hear everywhere. Customers want a zero trust approach to protecting their data. And the idea is if I can provide that, any sort of event is now a recoverable event. If the bad guys get the production data, I at least can go back and start restoring things. So what should be included in my zero trust requirements or my approach? Start off with a hardened, secure build for your backup solution. Again, I'm not picking on Microsoft, but avoid Windows because it's a great attack vector. Immutable and secure file systems. So the idea should be once I write data down, I shouldn't be able to alter it, right? The data should almost be frozen in amber. Backup data should never be presented in any sort of legacy storage mountable file system. and injects risk into the environment. Then be vigilant. There's a lot of solutions. I come from the channel and I sold for 6 years. And I sold a lot of different solutions. And what I found was vendors were actually using third parties to provide additional value on top of the backup for ransomware discovery and recovery. Well, what type of access are you giving that third party to the backup data? And does that inject any sort of supply chain risk now to my backup data? Just things to consider. Encryption, you would think that's just table stakes today, but it's not. I used to run into this as well. You'd find some solutions actually don't encrypt data when it lays down. So that's obviously a bit of a risk. And more importantly, data that's in flight, as it's being protected, it should all be encrypted so no one's on the network sniffing it and picking that up. And then key management used in the solution, look for solutions that are providing you with some sort of KMIP solution for key rotation, or even at least a TPM type of approach, hardware-based approach. And then with the solution, as far as how it communicates, again, back to these storage protocols, you find them everywhere and they're a great attack vector. Make sure that when the solution's communicating amongst itself, it's not using a legacy protocol for storage. Then the next, if I can provide a mutable format of data, encrypt everything, make sure we have MFA involved. We're using a multi-factor authentication to access the solution. All the way down to your break glass account. Your admin account in the event of an attack is gonna be your break glass account to go and start restoring things. Because if you think about it, if an attacker comes in, I'm gonna go right after Active Directory and I'm gonna take it out. Because you're gonna be trying to figure, oh God, how do I get logged into things? With regards to backup, all these systems have a local admin account and they should be secured with some sort of multi-factor, even if it's TOTP. Just so you have a secondary factor that you can use as simple as on a cell phone to make sure that the person logging in the solution should be the one actually accessing it. Next, this goes with just normal, talking LDAP, Active Directory. Again, secure that with anything that's gonna support multiple factors. That's just day-to-day log into the solution. Make sure whoever should be logging into it should be logging in. And then make sure the solution allows you to alert and syslog for any failed logins, so you can start seeing somebody trying to access the system that shouldn't be. We talked earlier about role-based access controls, so people should only have access to the solution, areas of the solution they need. So if I'm on a DBA and I'm accessing the backup solution, I probably should only see the databases that I should be interacting with and recovering and protecting. Least privilege access is ideal here. And then next, a lot of solutions provide you with an API to automate and pretty much run the solution end to end. Make sure it's authenticated. I've actually ran into solutions in the past that don't use any sort of API authentication. That's risk, because somebody can go in and command the API and start bleeding off retention and deleting things. And then last, if we apply all principles here, we're pretty well protected. But again, like I said in the beginning, everything in backup, it kind of falls back to retention, like how long I keep things around for. So if I keep my backup for 30 days and I get a disgruntled employee who's terminated and they go in and they find where the retention is kept in the solution, they bleed it back to a day and walk out the door, I'm in a bad spot. So look for solutions that offer you some sort of retention lock that will allow you to lock the retention on the object that's being protected. So once it's protected, you can't wind back the retention. Make sure that can't be disabled in any administrative way as well, or overridden by a policy with lesser retention. And then make sure, obviously, this seems obvious, but again, you run into things out there, the solution can't be factory reset, because obviously that defeats all these layers of protection. And then the last thing, again, back to retention, watch for NTP poisoning. If somebody can go in and fast forward NTP to the year 2050 today, what's gonna happen to all your backup data? The solution thinks it's 2050, it's gonna start bleeding off retention, it's gonna start deleting things, and you're in a bad spot. So watch out for solutions that will give you some protection from that, provide you something like a monotonic clock that will at least monitor time in 2 different ways, according to NTP, and then as the system's progressing and protecting things day to day. And just anything in security, really leverage these multiple layers of defense to best protect yourself. A couple other things, a lot of people want different solutions as well to provide additional value and backup. So look for solutions. They can also offer you additional value around discovering ransomware in your environment. They can use anomaly detection and say, hey, this state has changed more than it usually has. There's probably something going on with this workload. Also look for solutions that give you the ability to kind of detect that encryption and blast radius, because a backup system sees your data every single day and how it changes. So if it can detect, hey, there's been a lot of change here, and by the way the data changed, it's not in a normal factor, a normal structure of data, it's actually an encrypted factor. Excuse me, in an encrypted format. Look to align your your ransomware attack with any sensitive data. Again, since you can see this data every day, a lot of solutions can actually index and find sensitive data in the environment. So think about it this way: if I can find data that's been impacted with ransomware and also say, hey, this system also has PII data on it, you now know that the bad guys might have got their hands on sensitive data in your environment. My guess is if they encrypted the data, they had access to it, they probably did something to it, or they're going to extort it. And then, if you can, again, everything's indexed in a backup system. Can you be more proactive about recovery and identify if there's any ransomware in the payload of the point of recovery you're going to? So is the ransomware sitting dormant in the prior RPO you're trying to restore to? If you know that ahead of time, you can potentially quarantine, contain it, and recover safely. And then at the end of the day, can you recover quickly, like at what speed? Obviously, the lower RTO, we can provide the business, the faster you're up and running, data's being served back to the business. So quick review, we talked about ransomware, how they attack, how they typically occur, how they impact your backup production environments. Key terms of data protection, we talked about those. We talked about retention lock, we talked about mutability. We talked about weak points of data protection that are typically exposed in an attack. Concept and approaches to protect your last line of defense, right, your backup data. And outside of backup and recovery, what other value does the vendor provide you? And then last, what about my SaaS apps? And I actually just threw this in last minute today because when I look at SaaS, I always think of like M365. Everyone's got all their Microsoft applications running M365 today. What if that were to be hit? And the reason this came to mind is this came out. They actually we got sent out at work and at the office. Customers should be aware of this, right? These are attacks that are being used by the Russians to attack customers' M365 data. So it's a SaaS application. And same type of approach, right? If I can come in and I can get global access to somebody's M365 account, I can exfiltrate the data, delete it, leave the note, and then the backup or the M365 admins immediately go to what are called retention policies in M365. This determines how long things are kept in your M365 account. And typically that's what you do. You go to that to recover. But what we're finding is this is what the attackers are now using against you. They'll go in, they'll create a retention policy, put a day on it, apply it to your account, and walk away. Meanwhile, they've pulled all your information out and they're storing it on a third-party system and holding it for ransom. The other option, litigation hold. Get challenged with this a lot. Well, I'll just go to my litigation hold. Why protect it? Well, they're really not, litigation hold, legal hold's not meant for mass recovery. So what ends up happening, you pay the ransom. So things to consider in these environments to protect them is give yourself an air gap, right? Put the data in a different location other than M365 or even your Azure account, right? Separate it out. Make sure you got a solution that can rapidly recover you. And again, not that I'm picking on Microsoft today, that's why I would put the slide up, is they do offer some great tools for security and access that are very important to your M365 environment, but they don't provide any sort of backup or air gapping, right? It's just not in their solution. So just things to consider in your SaaS applications and obviously on-prem. That is all I had today. Any questions or feedback? Thank you very much.
Awesome, JB, thanks. I'll just finish up with one thing, why it matters to our customers, right? We kind of took you through the anatomy of a ransomware. Love case studies and helping customers out. We've got one insurance company, a large one in Michigan, and they had a cyber insurance policy premium coming up. And so if you guys know about these companies now, these insurance companies, they're getting crushed, right? They can't pay now just willy-nilly because they're losing money because of the ransomware threats and how many folks are getting hit. So now what they're doing is they're setting in precedents to their customers, and they're making these customers now go through a rigid process of what do you have in place to protect your data for a third copy or whatever their policy may be. So customers now have to step through those hoops to ensure these policy premiums are getting renewed. So that's some of the interesting times that we're in. So I'd be interested over drinks to kind of hear what other people are seeing in the industry around that. So it'll be a good conversation piece. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're saying that's not a good sound to have? So thank you very much to Dan and Jamie. Really, really appreciate that. Again, thank you to the sponsors, all the students. So real quick, on a membership, easiest membership of every group, just sign up on LinkedIn. Join us. I think there's about 700 members on there so far. We continually put out more and more information. So this event, actually, we live stream it, so it's on YouTube, it's on LinkedIn. So you can review it at any given time.
Big thank you to Eric for that, by the way. Thank you, Eric. Good job.
We're trying, getting better every time. CPE credits, so Renew's contact information. Reach out to her and she'll be able to get that to you. And then we found the WAMSA slide. And then I'm going to hand it to Juman real quick.
Thank you, Eric. So as promised, we do have 5 student winners. If you hear your name online or here, please make sure you go to Rob over there. Can you raise your hand, Rob, please? Okay, that's the guy you need to see. Okay, because we want to make sure your email is correct. First winner is Merit Amadi. Woohoo! Yes, they just won. Oh, you won a $25 Amazon gift card. I'm sorry, I didn't say what that was. Yay! Drew Bond, Akash Ahuja, Cameron Jordan, Spencer McWilliams, and that's it. That's all 5. Congratulations!
Yeah, and for all the students, we really appreciate you coming out, and by all means, tell other students. We want to continue to grow the community. So thank you again. Appreciate everybody coming out. Lots of food back there, drinks, so have a good time. And for those online, we'll see you next time.